we're tested in order for us to develop those muscles that mean that we can take on the next level of challenges. And that's what makes our lives richer. That's what I've come to know and believe.
That was Jo Ingram, and she's a business coach for new entrepreneurs. And she's on the show today to share with us her story of how she turned her vision, a dream that was on her heart, something that at one point in time she thought was impossible, that many others would say was impossible, how she was able to make that a reality. And even if you can't specifically relate to what she went through, you can relate to this feeling of wanting something so badly and not knowing how to make that a reality. So I think you'll get a lot from her story. If you're new to the show, welcome. This is the Intentional Mind Podcast, and you know we're all about helping you intentionally design your life. I'm Angela Barnard, and I just love talking about being intentional. This is why I created this show, and this is also why we have a Facebook group called The Intentionalists. And I'm over just being on social media and scrolling and watching everybody else live their life. Like, I want to have meaningful conversations. I want to learn from other people. And that's why we have the group. And it's so cool because we get to hear how other people are being more intentional with their lives. Another one of my favorite things is that I've been sending out an email on Tuesday with a tip to improve your life and to intentionally design your life. It's the kind of emails that I wish I would get in my email box, because it's just a quick thing and it makes you think like, oh yeah, I can add that into my life, and it's just helpful. So if you want to be on that list, you can see the links in the description of this episode. And if you're not already in our Facebook group, come over there and hang out with us. I promise it's not a waste of your time. All right, let's get on with Jo's story.
There I was at 29, giving birth to my first daughter, and I had it all lined up. For anyone that's had a child, I'm sure that you know the big deal that the birth plan is. And I was already a little bit, we're going back 16 years, but I was already like, no, this all has to be very natural and it has to be a water birth. And I had it all worked out. It did not go to plan.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, it was coming. Most people will tell you that, but I think for me, I was off the other end of the scale. To get to the point, basically, fortunately, my daughter was born healthy and wonderful, but as at the point when she was born, I bled out so severely that they thought I was going to die. In fact, the doctors told my then husband and my parents that I probably wasn't going to make it through the night. To save my life, I was given a hysterectomy. So at that point where I birthed my first daughter, I was 29 years old, I was also told, you're not going to have any more children. And having that control taken away from me, because I'm also a person that really has liked to be very much in control in my life, was, all of it was utterly devastating. And I spent 2 weeks in intensive care, and it was all really dramatic. But coming out of that experience, I basically very quickly decided that I wasn't going to be defined by anything that happened to me, that I was going to make my choices about how I lived my life, both in terms of how I identified with myself as a victim or not a victim. And there was a time at the beginning, and I suffered some PTSD, and I went through counseling where I did see myself as a victim. And I felt that something had happened to me, that almost intentionally, which, I now don't feel that case. I was very unlucky and there were mistakes made, but certainly nothing intentional. It was very unfortunate.
I love that you were honest and you're like, I went to this state of feeling like a victim. And I think that I always say that it's not an issue that you go there. It's an issue that you stay there. And you did something that caused you to shift out of there. And I know that you got some signs during the story to keep going, but like, what specifically helped you kind of shift out of that state?
Well, at first I decided that I was going to really become obsessed. Maybe I didn't even decide it. It just happened. And I think a big thing about people reaching their goals and achieving what they want to achieve is them basically having a very single-minded approach to it and becoming obsessed. And it's just something that wells up within you that you just have no control over. You just want to do it. And for me, it was understanding why what had happened and working out how I could resolve it. And for me, resolving it meant completing my family. And that was what I became obsessed by. I was like, you know what, I'm not done. I'm one of three. I really wanted to have more than just one child. And I think the fact that had happened to me made me even more resolute that that was going to happen. Also, around that time, soon after my daughter was born, myself and her father divorced. And not too long after, still my daughter was toddler, I met my now husband, who had no children. So I think I felt even more strongly that we needed to complete our family.
All right, so you heard Joe say the thing that got her out of that kind of victimhood state that a lot of us go to at times because of things that have happened to us that were unfortunate. It makes total sense that we would go there. How she was able to get out of that state and not live there was that she became obsessed about what it was that she wanted. That's what helped her shift. She got clear on what it was that she wanted. And a lot of us get clear on what it is that we want because of the contrast, because of knowing what it is we don't want. I don't want the life where I don't have any more kids. Like that went through her mind. What I do want is to have more kids. So I'm going to be obsessed with figuring out how I can make that happen. All right, back to her story.
So what I did was, and it's interesting because now in retrospect, I can understand that what I did was actually the same steps that many people who are successful at things do, but I didn't know them consciously at the time. They included things like modeling people who'd been successful before, really becoming obsessed with the work, but also really importantly, especially for me, because so much of my coaching is about action now, and I can see where a lot of that stems from. And that was that I believed that I just needed to keep stepping forward one thing at a time and to not become overwhelmed with the magnitude of the big picture.
All right, raise your hand right now if you have ever become overwhelmed by the magnitude of the big picture. Overwhelmed by thinking about all the things that you need to do to get to where you want to be. And that overwhelm has held you back from moving forward, from taking any action. Raise your hand. I'm raising my hand right now as I'm talking because I'm telling you that has held me back so many times. And I felt like I need that reminder that Joe just shared. One thing at a time, one step at a time. It's too easy to get overwhelmed. And we got to stay focused on that one little step. And that's that little progress that we get, that keeps us motivated. So real quick, I want to share a story before we get back with Joe's story. Recently, I was in Ecuador. I was with my mother-in-law. We were hiking the highest elevation I've been to, 16,500 feet. My mother-in-law was hiking, which is insane because a year ago, like that would not happen. But she's transformed her body and her life, and it's just so cool. But guys, it was hard. And when you come from living in a lower elevation and going to 16,500 feet, you start to get some altitude sickness. And then it's freezing and you're trying to hike up this mountain. It's easy for anyone to want to give up because you get overwhelmed by the magnitude of all of it. You look up and you see that's all that's left. Your face hurts because it's cold, the wind's blowing, you're having a hard time breathing because of the elevation. It's easy to want to quit. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't want to do it. And I hike all the time. And I wanted to be there with my mother-in-law and have her do it. And I thought, I'm like, what could help both of us do this? If we focus on just a little bit at a time, you know what I'm trying to say? Just a little bit at a time. And what I said is like, let's just do 20 steps at a time. And every 20 steps, we'll take a little break and catch our breath. And we'll do 20 more steps. So literally just focusing on that little chunk there. And we made it to the top. And it was amazing. And we were so proud of ourselves. And I'm so glad I didn't quit because the view was beautiful. Perfect example of just a little bit. And this has been something I've been practicing in my life. This concept of every little bit counts and doing one thing at a time. Just focusing on small amounts versus the whole picture and the way that can overwhelm us. That's with any human brain. So just know your brain, that your brain is going to get overwhelmed by all the things. So you just don't focus on all the things. It's really that simple. All right, we're going back to Joe's story. Here we go.
And for me, the big picture was surrogacy. And I identified that I wanted another baby. I wanted to do it with the help of a surrogate because I wanted to pursue having a biological child of mine and my new husband's. So that was like, right, that's what I need.
So for those that don't know anything about surrogacy, can you explain that? Like what's
Sure.
that
I mean,
about?
because I didn't have a womb, and in the circumstance where anybody isn't able to actually carry a baby, this is a case where another lady will actually gestate, carry your child to term. And what that means is that you can, through IVF, actually create an embryo, and the surrogate mum would carry that embryo. So it's your biological child carried by a surrogate mother. There's another form of surrogacy that's not that the surrogate mother might actually be her biological child, but
Yeah.
in my case, I really earmarked gestational surrogacy as what would be perfect for us, and that's really what I wanted to manifest.
So it's so interesting because I love that you could see that pattern where you did the things that a lot of what we would consider successful people do to make their dreams a reality. And a big part of that was modeling. And I love that because I always talk about that, like looking at who has what you desire and kind of what there's a program, there's some patterns that kind of led to that. There's a recipe that led to that result. And you acknowledge that. The other thing I love is that you basically decided that instead of being at the effect of your life, you were going to be the designer and the creator of it. And you were not going to let obstacles stop you from making that a reality. And when something showed up and told you that it couldn't happen, you kept getting curious and you were like, well, how could it happen? And then that curiosity led you to take all this different action. And I think it's important for the listeners to hear that like, instead of getting mad or like upset or bitter and like go to those lower energy levels, as I would call it, step up and just get curious and start asking the right questions, because when you start asking the right questions, then you'll be led down the path that I think that will really serve you.
100%. And I was all about the questions. I spent so much time in chat rooms. That was the thing back then. And, on the phone, speaking to people who I found who'd done it. So I was like, my God, you've got a surrogate baby. How? And I actually identified that the way that I wanted to approach that was actually in California. Now I'm based in London, London born and bred, but there's a lot of, there's bigger issues with surrogacy in the UK, or certainly was 16 years ago. And I realized that really the way that they were doing it in California was how I wanted to do it. I really liked the network and the support and the way it was done very legally. And it was just a really good process in my view. So I was like, right, well, how do I get from London, no money, no resources, no connections, no knowledge, to sitting in California with my surrogate baby? And that was basically going, we need all of that.
You are starting to vision this in your mind, right? Like you kept thinking about it. Did you see those images in your mind of yourself doing that? Do you feel like that was helpful to get you to where you ended up?
Massively. It's interesting because now, of course, I understand about the law of attraction and manifesting a lot more and a lot more about different approaches. I didn't know any of that back then, but now I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I did. And I even bought booties, like the little baby shoes. And I'm like, yeah, these are for my baby who is coming.
Yeah. So you totally acted as if it already was, which is something that there's so much wisdom in that. I mean, there's biblical wisdom on that. If you follow the law of attraction stuff, all of that, like even energy, like you're acting as if it already was. It's like you're turning to that same frequency in a sense to bring that in. And
I thought I was crazy at the time because I even earmarked this piece of music. There was the name that I wanted to call my baby. The song itself wasn't that relevant, but the name of this song. And every time it played, I was like, oh yeah, that's the universe telling me it's coming. And every time it played, it just reinforced it. My husband, bless him, he did actually start believing it too after a while. But at first he was like, what? I was like, no, it's cool. This song's playing, because I was having doubts. And it's just telling me, just put your doubts aside, or we're having problems, there's a barrier, just keep going, just through one more doorway and see where it leads.
I was just listening to an interview by James Wedmore, who has the Mind Your Business podcast, and he is such a great leader in like kind of like designing your business from like really that spirituality kind of perspective, and he just has so much wisdom. But he was talking about like his tips, and one of the top ones was that you look for the signs, that you're always seeing like how they might show up. And he talked about music being them, animals, or sometimes he just feels like he sees things in threes. I hear that a lot from people too. So obviously there was signs showing up for you to keep going. So let's get back to the story. Tell me what happened after that.
Yeah, so but I'm a really like practical person, and I'm like both woo woo and practical, and I think that's fine. And it was interesting because even as this stuff was happening, I wasn't saying in my mind, oh yeah, that's definitely spirit telling me to do that. But although I do feel that that could be the case, but I also feel that it's enough to believe it, because believing it shores up my confidence to keep stepping forward. So it has like a double advantage.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of times people will say to me, well, like, what if this isn't true? You know, like when I'm saying like, believe this way or whatever, this, and I'm like, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what thoughts serve you. That's going to help you take action to move forward. And whether you decide that that's going to be because you are more of the woo and you believe whatever, or however you want to identify as that, or you simply are like, because I'm strategic and I want to be able to manage my mind. And I know that this thought and this belief will serve me to be better. It kind of reminds me of like even the placebo effect. If you think about it, it's like how powerful that can be. And who cares if the pill actually works or if it doesn't work? I mean, if it's an actual real pill or not, if it's still giving you the same results.
100%. Yeah. And that's why I looked at it. So I didn't worry, you know, do I have to believe in this in order to feel that way? Because it kind of worked either way. So I just embraced it. And then I moved forward, and, you know, to cut a long story short, I mean, it was kind of, there were ups and downs, and we were fortunate. We flew over to California and we met this wonderful lady who became our surrogate through an agency that I had learned about through the people that I had spoken to, and I followed their path. Literally, like, I was blessed to be able to just, they were like, speak to this agency, speak to this doctor, that's who was amazing for us. And we just went along that way. So some bits were really smooth, but, you know, there was a lot of difficulty as well. I mean, one of the things, the time when we were expecting was during the volcanic ash cloud. I don't know if you remember that. Actually, sorry, just before we were expecting, because I was doing IVF at the time, and I know a lot of people go through IVF and are going to understand what I'm talking about. But what happens is you get to a point where you have to have the eggs retrieved because the medication is really strong and your ovaries are like really full, and you have to go through this procedure. And at exactly that time, all the planes were grounded. There was a massive volcanic explosion. There was a load of ash across the globe. Back in end of 2010, this was. So basically there were no flights. And here I was in London looking up at this empty, peaceful sky, going, how are we getting back to California, you know, where our doctor is? And I think my doctor must have been kind of woo-woo, because I was speaking to him on the phone and he just said, it's all gonna be fine. It's like, trust me. And I'm like, yeah, but I was supposed to be on a flight in 2 days and there hasn't been planes flying in 2 weeks. It's like, it's cool. And then like the next day, the planes took off again. So we although, you know, must have given me quite a lot of palpitations, but it worked. And anyway, along came not just one baby, but twins. And we were blessed with, double blessing, two more girls. So I've got 3 daughters now, and then the twins are nearly 10. So we're going back a decade. And at the time, I didn't know anybody personally that, certainly from where I come from, had gone through surrogacy and had this amazing story. But the story didn't end there. We kind of ran into a few roadblocks along the way that were barriers that I had to overcome as well. First of all, the twins were really premature. They were 29 weekers. So we had a lot of touch and go at the beginning of their lives. Thank God they're really well, and they didn't have any sort of lingering effects of that prematurity. But at the time when you're in the NICU for 6 weeks, it's a hard thing to take after all that long journey. But thank God the surrogate that we worked with and the twins were fine. So that was obviously a blessing. But then we flew back to the UK when they were well enough to travel. And as we came into Heathrow, into London, we were asked very nicely to come into a side room and told that our twins did not have leave to remain in the UK because they were considered American citizens and they were not considered British. Which is kind of bonkers if you consider that there are genetic children and we're both British. But it isn't the way it works across the world. So we had to go through the High Court, which is obviously the highest court in the UK, to be recognised as their legal parents. So they had the right to be British and stay in the UK.
Wow,
So
there's so much like hurdles throughout the process. And I think it's good for people to hear this because it's such a great story and that it's filled with so much blessing. But you can see how it wasn't like completely a smooth ride. Like it required you to keep believing and keep like trusting your power and everything to work through it. Right?
yeah, that's really well said. Really well said. It's interesting, but a lot of people go through these hard times, but the real gold I've discovered is the lessons that you learn from it. It's like, yes, we all have tough stuff that happens in our lives, some tougher than others, but some people take things harder than others. Whatever the way, we all feel the burden of times that are difficult in our lives. And for me, I mean, at the time when I was in it, it felt overwhelming. And I think I needed about 3 years just to catch my breath after all of that, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. But then as I sort of move forward, and certainly now, it's formed a real opinion of myself within my heart, because I formed a mantra. I don't know if you like doing this too. I have a personal mantra.
Mhm.
And my personal mantra is, I make the impossible possible.
Ooh, I love that.
And I formed that for myself, which is that I took on what was deemed impossible. It was like, to myself, and at the time it was like, so hang on, you've been through this terrible thing, and yeah, true, you can't have more kids, but don't be silly. You're not going to fly to California and have a surrogate baby. I mean, it was just like, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever.
All right, I got to stop right there because you know that there has been times in your life where you've wanted something, you've thought about it, and then this thought has popped up. Don't be silly. That's not going to happen for you. I can tell you that that pops up in my mind often because I'm always thinking about things I want to create and do in this world, right? And it pops up in my mind. Don't be silly. That's not going to happen for you. And I have to consciously choose that I'm not going to believe that and instead choose a thought that serves me. And that can be your own personal mantra, if you want to call it that. One of my favorites is everything is happening for me. And I believe that instead of things happening to me, that they're happening for me. Because at the end of the day, I feel like God is in control and He is for me always, period, non negotiable. That doesn't mean that I love everything and it feels so good, right? No, because I'm a human being living here on earth. Everything doesn't feel always good. But I know that God is for me. So therefore, everything that is happening for me. That's just a belief I hold on to that I feel like really just serves me. Another one is I'm intentional, but I'm unattached. I'm not going to lie, when I get up in the morning, I literally had to tell myself, like, I don't want to get up. And I will say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Like, you can get up at 5 a.m. and you can go do your morning routine, Ange, because you can do all things with God. Like, I literally have to tell myself that. So, anyways, it's really important to have some messages for yourself because all that other stuff, the thoughts are going to show up that are going to try to hold you back. That's just how it works. The brain is trying to keep you in the same kind of positions that you are, well, the subconscious is, because that's its job, is to keep the current program running. So you want to work with your brain and give it some new thoughts to think and believe. Okay, one last thing to wrap up Joe's story is that she was able to make her vision a reality. It ended up being better than she imagined, but we know what? That it wasn't all butterflies and rainbows the whole way there, that she faced some resistance, right? And I think that's something we got to remember is that when we are working towards the things that are on our heart, it is normal to face resistance. In Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, which is one of my other favorite books, he talks about resistance and how it shows up. And I just want to make it known that just because you're facing resistance doesn't mean that it's not for you and that you should give up and should stop trying. That's not what it means. If anything, I think a lot of times it means that we're on the right path, that where we are headed is worth going to. Let's go back to the mountain analogy. When you're hiking up that mountain, I feel like when I get to the top of these mountains that I hike sometimes and I see this beautiful view, I'm like, yes, that was so worth it. And it's almost like I'm even more proud of myself or I enjoy the view even more, I guess, because I did work a little harder to get up there. And I think it's just the human part in us that wants to overcome things, that wants to grow, that wants to be better. And think about movies that we even want to watch. We don't want to watch a movie that's all like, that has no challenge in it. It'd just be a boring movie to us. We like to watch people overcome things, grow, and get better. And we want that too. I'm not saying let's call in all the difficulties in the world. Come on over here, let's make our life difficult. No, I'm not saying that. If anything, I'm all about you making your life more intentional. But what I'm saying here is that we're going to face resistance. And it's all about who we're going to be when that resistance shows up. Are we going to go to the victimhood mindset, or are we going to go to, what is this teaching me? What can I learn here? What opportunity is here for me? Even holding on to the thought that it's happening for you. That's a higher level kind of thought to think. All right, the other thing real quick is talking about impossible and possible. A lot of us deem things that are impossible for us as things that maybe are easy for other people. I think about like even my mother-in-law, I just shared a little bit of her story, but I remember her saying like that I could never hike up a mountain like that. Like that's impossible for me. And look at her do it now. Like she's definitely shifted her thoughts around it that got her to where she is now. But remember, she focused on a little bit at a time. And now she's talking about running 5Ks and things like that. I'm like, who are you? When she used to say that she was someone that would never be able to run, that was impossible for her. So it doesn't need to be something that is legit, like to everybody would think that whatever it is that you're trying to do isn't completely impossible. No, it can just feel impossible to you. You think about what that thing is right now in your mind that might feel a little hard, that might feel a little impossible for you. And then think about what is that little bit that you can do, like those 20 steps at a time that I talked about hiking up the mountain, or that one little thing that can move you closer to where you want to be versus getting overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all. All right, I just felt like I needed to share that again. Okay, so for Jo, you can find Jo she has a podcast called The Action Taker Tribe. It's really good. Get on her email list because I always love her emails. You can find her on Instagram. If you look up Jo Ingram, you're going to find her. She also gave us some questions that we can ask ourselves to set our own goals. It's a freebie that she created. That's really awesome. So that'll be in the description of this episode. If you feel like you're trying to find something like links to anything I mentioned on the podcast, you can always go to my website, intentionalmindpodcast.com, and there's always notes there that relate to every episode, or it's just easier to read the description than sometimes it can be on the app. So if you need that, go there. All right, leave a review if you haven't. Have an awesome week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.